Hey, Prolific community. Welcome back to the Prolific Hub podcast, a digital archive of all things life and the pursuit of creative entrepreneurship. I'm your host, Aaliyah Cheyenne. This podcast celebrates all of the change makers, way makers, and world builders who are charting their own paths and inspiring others to do the same. We highlight creatives, solopreneurs, entrepreneurs, and also discuss everyday life topics. If you've already rated and written a review for the podcast, thank you. If you haven't had a chance to just yet, it's never too late. Reviews help tremendously in the podcasting world, so I appreciate you taking the time to leave one. The best way to discover new podcasts is by word of mouth, so keep sharing the Prolific Hub podcast with your tribe. Be sure to follow the show on your favorite podcast platform and subscribe to our YouTube channel. If you'd like to show even more support, text the show, send in a voice note, or consider a monthly subscription. See the show notes below for more details. Thank you so much for tuning in. Now sit back, relax, and enjoy the episode. Y'all, there is a major loneliness epidemic. This has come up a bit in recent interviews, but also just trends I'm seeing online, things that I'm reading about, but there is a major loneliness epidemic and it's not okay. Like, we as human beings are designed to be social creatures, and it's really sad that so many people are feeling so lonely. There was this trend on TikTok where folks were sharing carousels, and the initial language would be social media isn't a real place or social media is fake. So here are some things that I'm struggling with. And in almost every carousel or video I saw of people doing that trend, ranging in ages from like Gen Z to millennials, on almost every single video or carousel I saw of that trend, there would always be someone talking about how lonely they are. And the pandemic really did a number on us. Like I say all the time, prior to 2020, even though it was burning me the heck out, I was constantly doing stuff all the time, like work all day and still go to dinner after, work all day, still do an activity after, like getting home late all the time, multiple days a week, and still doing stuff on the weekends. And through the course of the pandemic, and of course it could be much worse, obviously, I survived it. I'm healthy. I'm still here. My family members are still here. There's so many people who cannot say the same, and that is something that will live with them and haunt them forever. It was a really tragic and horrific time, and so many people are still struggling with it. Like, still a thing. People are still wearing masks in some spaces, vulnerable people who are immunocompromised are still worried about COVID-19, among many other things and many other variants. However, for folks who remained relatively physically healthy during that time, in a lot of cases, those folks have since been struggling mentally. Like, either the pandemic exacerbated mental health issues that were already there, or folks for the most part felt fine, but now on the other side of it, they're struggling through things that they did not struggle with prior to 2020. Loneliness is a part of that. So many people lost their sense of community during that time. So many people lost a sense of connection during that time and have either struggled to maintain that connection or struggled to repair or rebuild on the other side of it. And it is having a stark impact. I actually talked about loneliness a teeny tiny bit in an upcoming interview with Margeaux Feldman, who created the Instagram page Softcore Trauma. And I'm going to insert a tiny little clip of that conversation here for you to hear. And I think that's really special too, because something I've spoken about on this podcast before, it's just finding your community. At the end of the day, that's how we're gonna get free, live in a better world. So I think also just on that front though, some things I've heard about people who are just deep in their creative work or deep in their solopreneurship or their entrepreneurship is that it can sometimes be really lonely. Like if you're really committed to it and you're constantly working, you're not giving yourself the space to breathe and to work, like it can be really lonely. So I'm curious if you've at any point experienced that with your career, and if you have, like how you've kind of remedied that.
Yeah, I mean, I think I've been really lucky in a lot of ways to not really have experienced that, in part because I was already building friendships with people who are also doing the same kind of thing, like they would share my post or they would respond to like one of my posts, and then, we would kind of get into each other's DMs, and
Yeah,
I'd be following their work and sharing it. So I already had probably like a handful of, like social media friends who were also doing their own thing. So I was really grateful, to have people that I could bounce ideas off of, or in moments where the internet was like not being a super kind place, like I had people who I could talk about those experiences with, and I'm grateful because I have like amazing best friends and like an amazing partner, but like, they're not doing that kind of work. One of my besties is, but like she actually really has to be off of social media for like her mental health. I mean, for folks who are feeling that loneliness, I would just say like, who are people like that are doing this work that like you really love? It might sound like scary or like, vulnerable to like slide into their DMs, but like for me, whenever someone's like done that and just sent me like a message, it's like makes my day. So, if you can, just do the brave, scary thing of like putting yourself out there. I'm sure that those people probably are also feeling disconnected and isolated, and like they would love to have someone to connect with who understands what it means to do this kind of work. Yeah, I just, community has always just been so important to me. So even, I mean, doing a PhD, when you're doing your dissertation, you're largely just like alone, like in wherever it's like your office or your home or wherever it is, like, cranking out this like dissertation. And I just knew that I would be miserable if I was like never seeing people, in those days. Like I created like a writing group, and we met virtually once a week to just like work on our writing together. So that's like another thing I would suggest. Like if you know, at least just all it takes is one person. If you have one person, that you feel comfortable enough just like saying like, hey, do you want to have like a virtual meetup, like, once a week or once a month, where we can just like share digital space and talk about what we're working on, and then just have some quiet work time that we're just sharing together. Like that really, it's also a great accountability tool, because somehow when there's someone else on the screen, even though they have no idea what you're doing, you are more productive because they're present. You're less likely to like, decide to get up and vacuum your apartment or do whatever other task there is to do.
I love that advice. That's so good. And it helps to alleviate some of those feelings around loneliness, but it also creates an accountability partner in a way. And I think that's really good too, especially in work around creativity. And we're back to the present episode. This conversation around loneliness also came up in another interview that I have upcoming with Jannette Anderson, who does a lot of work with what she calls the maturepreneur. So people who are entering entrepreneurship at the age of 55 plus. And we talked a bit about what loneliness and isolation looks like for seniors, especially. And I'm going to insert a quick clip about that here.
The second epidemic is the epidemic of loneliness. Since COVID, that was a big issue there. People thought, oh, well, we're back to normal. It's okay. We aren't. People have not come back out in the same way. Even if you go to networking events, you'll notice there's a difference. But especially for older people, they tend to be more isolated. And if they're no longer working, a lot of their support structure goes away. So they tend to be quite lonely as well. And loneliness will take 8 years off of your life.
Yeah.
So it is important that they get back into community. And so becoming an entrepreneur is another way to do that. Although entrepreneurship can also be very lonely. So you have to
Yes.
find ways
Yep.
to connect. As you know, you've been doing this a while, it can be lonely. We spend a lot of time talking to people one-to-one, maybe on the screen, but it's not the same.
And we're back to the current episode. And I just think all this is really sad. And I think that sucks. Like, loneliness can definitely suck. It can be haunting and it can be draining. I think there's a difference between loneliness, isolation, and chosen solitude. Like, it's one thing if you choose solitude and you are comfortable in that and content in that and happy in that. That's one thing. But forced loneliness or forced isolation because of a lack of connection is something totally different, and it can literally take years off of our lives, and that's sad. And it sucks to be in a time where more and more and more people are feeling this way. And I think what we're also seeing and learning is that just because social media exists, just because you have access to so many people through social media, and I'm not downplaying the importance and the need for friends online, but it doesn't always make up for, and it doesn't always substitute for in-person connection and interaction. Connecting digitally doesn't always suffice when it comes to, connection in the physical and connection in person. I think that it's really hard and really difficult and really sad. I hope that for anyone listening who might be experiencing loneliness or isolation, that you take a step back, take a deep breath, and really think about who in your community you can turn to and lean on if you're feeling that way. One anecdote to loneliness and isolation is connection. And if there's someone in your life who can help alleviate that feeling, someone maybe you haven't connected with in a long time, or that you want to connect with, or a go-to family member, a go-to friend, whoever it might be, or whatever the case may be, like, to seek that out and to find connection where you feel possible. I think another aspect of this too is we as a society have put so much weight and focus on romantic partnership. I personally think that has a lot to do with the powers that be wanting people to be in unions and procreate and keep the workforce alive and sustained. But outside from that, yes, romantic love is valuable and important. And I'm seeing so many people online too talk about how they're whatever age, 30s, 40s, and they've never been in a serious relationship. They've never been loved or desired romantically, and they don't even know what that feels like. And there's an immense amount of grief in some people feeling that way. And I think part of that is because as a people, we've put a lot more emphasis on romantic partnership than friendships and community care. But I think the other part of that is because as human beings, we deeply long to be loved and to be seen and to be cared for and to be desired. And I think on the one hand, there are people either who have been single for a long time or who are newly single or child who are excited to be single at some point because maybe the situation they're in ain't working out. And on the one hand, that's fine for folks who are embracing it. But I think for folks who are tired of being single, who are ready to love and be loved, there is a special and acute type of loneliness that comes with that kind of longing. One that no amount of self-care or no amount of, friendship can really heal or, distract us from. And that is something to sit with. I think on the one hand, there are a lot of people who are realizing that maybe perhaps for them, singleness is better than some of the situations they've been in, or maybe they have some more work they feel like they need to do before they can explore partnership. Singleness carries its own type of loneliness in a way, and working through that can sometimes be really tough and really daunting for people for whatever reason they've chosen to be single, for whatever circumstance they've been forced to be single. There's some people who maybe their relationship didn't work out, or some people who perhaps have not had a choice in becoming single because maybe they've lost their partner. And I think on the one hand, what's really interesting is to see how certain companies and brands are like responding to that. I don't know, some folks have seen the latest round of Bumble advertisements and billboards that they've gotten a lot of backlash to, because a lot of it was not, I think they're taking it down or in the process of taking it down. A lot of that language wasn't really thoughtful or sensitive toward people who are choosing celibacy or abstinence for whatever reason. And in response to losing a lot of male users, they decided to also alienate a lot of women users, which is crazy, and are having to deal with the repercussions of that. But I think part of it too is that on the one hand, a lot of people are seeking emotional intimacy and connection with others, and sometimes are ending up on these dating apps where maybe that's not what the other person wants. They just want to hook up, and they're locking it down for whatever reason until they feel comfortable and safe enough to explore that aspect of their life and their body with someone else. Just the response to that being like, you've been abstinent or celibate long enough, like, be for real, is wild. Is wild. But I think there are so many things that go into just loneliness. And I think one, as I've said before, like one of the solutions to that is community. And I think you have to engage in community in a way that feels good to you, but also in a way that challenges you. It's always important to connect with friends, and people form different relationships with friends over various periods of time and through different courses of life. Like, it could be a friendship you make in childhood, you make in grade school, you make in high school, you make in college, you make at your first serious job. And I think it's also important to be mindful of where people fall in the spectrum of friendship. Like, not everyone's going to be your best friend. Like, some people are going to be more on an acquaintance level. Some people are going to be more on a friendly and friendship level. Some people will be best friends. Some people, you can lean on for certain activities and certain conversations. Others, you shouldn't and you can't. And I think also identifying relationships and friendships that feed us the most, especially during seasons of loneliness, is a part of the cure. Finding community in whatever way that looks like for you, whether that's through activism, as we'll talk about with our conversation with Margeaux Feldman coming up soon, or whether that's finding community through different activities you like. Like, I've mentioned before that there is a foraging group that I'm a part of, and I enjoy, like, especially when the weather is nice, like going on foraging activities with that group and learning more about plant medicine and being surrounded by people who have that wisdom and who are excited to be in nature. Not every friend is going to want to do that or participate in that. I know which friends to call if I want to go check out a new exhibit at a museum. I know who to call if I want to just have a girls' night in and have dinner and catch up and hang out with my dog. Like, it just depends. And I think having a sense of community is an important way to combat this loneliness epidemic, because it is wild and kind of scary. Some people through loneliness are driven to extreme bouts of depression. Some people through loneliness are driven to extreme bouts of just madness and a lack of sanity. Loneliness doesn't always have a positive effect, especially when you're not lonely by like choice, you're lonely by force, you know? So I think finding ways to alleviate that is super important. Having a village, leaning on a village. I really do hope for our society that we become less and less individualistic and more community care centered. I am someone who has been a pro self-care strategy and regimen for a long time, and I am learning how much more important and valuable community care actually is. You know, you've seen so many statistics and examples about how community and friends show up for people as they age, when they get sick. I've heard so many countless stories, and we'll talk about some statistics around this in an upcoming conversation with Jannette Anderson, but so many statistics around what happens as people age, like where people think they go. Like a lot of times it's not always family that people are leaning on as they get older. It's community and it's friends. It's friends who's showing up to take care of them when they're sick or going through sad times or depressing times. It's friends that are caring for each other in older age. We're witnessing now too, especially back on the like hetero dating front, many women are becoming deeply unsatisfied with the way that men are showing up in relationships, and they're choosing themselves. They're choosing to be abstinent, celibate, take a break. They're choosing to work on themselves, and that's sending a lot of men into a panic. Like there are a lot of men who are absolutely like doing the work and trying to become better, and there are a lot who are not because they're falling into the incel trap. But it makes me think about the ways that women are showing up for each other and in community with each other. And it's always funny to me whenever like old rerun episodes of the Golden Girls comes on, because sometimes I think to myself, like, is that the worst thing in the world to like have a nice, comfortable house with a few of your friends and you all come and go as you please. You support each other, you help each other, especially as you're eight. Like, is that the worst thing in the world? I don't think so. So sometimes I think about that too, and I wonder what the future is going to look like, especially with this movement of decentering men, especially with this movement of people trying their hardest to combat loneliness through community and through friendship. And even considering this loneliness epidemic and what that's driving some folks to do and how it's driving some folks to feel, I think that's going to be really interesting. I've spoken about solo trips in the past. I took my first one, it's like a birthday trip in 2023. Went to Turks and Caicos, and yeah, I enjoyed that experience. I'm excited to have a solo trip again at some point. But I heard this idea recently of a solitude trip. So, a solo trip is going with the intention that you're going on your own, but not necessarily that you'll be alone. Like, you'll still meet people and connect with people and go on group activities, and you may meet friends along the way. But the idea of a solitude trip, and I believe I heard this on the Small Doses podcast, Amanda Seales' podcast, like an older episode, and I believe it was her who was talking about a solitude trip. And a solitude trip is going on a trip with the intention of being in solitude with yourself. Like there is no desire or pressure or need to have a lot of interaction with others. Even though you're going on the trip on your own, there's no pressure to make connection with others. It is a solitude trip so that you sit with yourself, you be with yourself. And it made me think about some people who go on those like quiet retreats where you go on experiences and you don't speak for long periods of time, days at a time, maybe weeks at a time. And I'm very intrigued by this idea of a solitude trip. And I think it might be something I want to explore in the future, at least once an experience, and see how I feel about it. But I'm also someone who is very comfortable in solitude to the extent that I, still have access to friends and family when I need it. But I'm also very comfortable being with myself in silence. And I also enjoy being with other people who are also comfortable with silence. Like it's a comfortable and a content, like I know you're there, we're here with each other, but we can sit comfortably in the quiet. I appreciate that too. So I'm very curious about what it would be like to do an intentional solitude trip. So if and when I do that, I will be sure to let you all know. But yeah, our upcoming episodes are not about loneliness. It comes up as a topic in upcoming episodes, which is why I wanted to include some clips here and do an episode centered around that. So I just hope that if you are someone who's listening, experience any form of just loneliness or aloneness, or if you feel isolated, I hope that you will take a moment to sit with that feeling and really think about what it would take for you to come out of that. Like, think about memories or experiences that made you feel the most full and the most fed. If you can't recreate that exact thing, how can you do something close? How can you be in a community with others who love and care about you and support you and would want to hold your hand through this period of feeling intense loneliness and isolation? I hope you think about what community care looks like with you, how you can be gentle with yourself, this idea of doing one gentle thing for yourself. We talk about this a little bit in an upcoming interview with Margeaux Feldman, but I was also listening to an episode of Balanced Black Girl recently. It was an episode featuring Tembi Locke, who wrote the memoir from scratch that was later adapted as a short series on Netflix. For the end of the episode, there's a moment where Tembi is talking about, like, what's the gentlest thing, what's the most gentle thing I can do for myself today. This theme and this conversation has come up recently, whether through listening through a podcast or engaging with someone else in conversation. And I think it's really important. It's something I want to incorporate into my day if I'm feeling down or low energy. What's the most gentle thing I can do to take care of myself? So I want you to think about what's the most gentle thing you can do to take care of yourself. Something that feels easy, but that would bring you comfort. For me, sometimes that's making a really hot cup of tea and sitting down under a blanket and taking my time and drinking that tea while my dog Storm, like, her head is on my lap. And some of my sweetest, gentlest moments are when she's taking a nap and, like, snoring and her head is on my lap and I'm sipping my tea. So think about what gentleness feels like for you. Think about what comfort feels like for you, especially in a season of loneliness. I hope that you will find the medicine that you need either in community, whether that be through partnership, maybe you're partnered and your partner helps alleviate some of that, or if you're single and there's no partner right now, perhaps through community, through friendship period. That's really important, helps to sustain us and keep us vibrant and healthy and strong through loving relationships. I hope that although this episode was a lot of rambling and just thoughts kind of sputtering out, I hope that you were able to take something away from it. I hope that you're able to pause and find a moment of reflection. And I hope that if you are experiencing a season of loneliness or grief or heaviness or sadness, that you will find the medicine that you need to feel relief and comfort and joy again. And I hope to meet you back here next week for our next episode. We'll be speaking with Margeaux Feldman, who created the Instagram page Softcore Trauma, about all things creativity, all things writing, all things academia, and all things community. So until soon, friend, take good care. Hey, Prolific family. Dropping in with a quick break from the episode to say that I can't thank you enough for tuning in each week and supporting the show. I hope you find it valuable, insightful, and inspiring. If you like it or love it, I love that even more. So please continue to share the show with your friends, family, coworkers, acquaintances, and beyond. If you'd like to show this podcast some extra love, consider a monthly subscription. Our hosting platform, Buzzsprout, offers a commitment-free, cancel anytime subscription to support the podcast for as low as $3 a month. You spending your hard-earned money to support this show means so much to me, and I don't take that for granted. If you decide to show up and show out in this way, thank you so much. You can click the link in the episode description below to subscribe at any time. I appreciate you for listening and sharing the show with your network no matter what. Now let's get back to the episode. Hey friend, if you made it this far, you're a rock star. Thank you so much for tuning in to this episode. The Prolific Hub podcast is hosted and produced by me, Aaliyah Cheyenne. If this episode resonated with you, please leave a 5-star rating and positive written review. Reviews help tremendously in the podcasting world, so I appreciate you taking the time to leave one. Be sure to share this episode with a friend and follow the show wherever you get your podcasts. Follow the Prolific Hub pod on your favorite social media platforms to stay connected. Consider supporting the show with a monthly subscription or send us your thoughts on this episode via text or voice note. Find all of the juicy details in the show notes below. Catch you on the next episode.